Fanny Mendelssohn was born on November 14, 1805, in Hamburg, Germany. She was the eldest of 4 children. Her grandfather was a famous Jewish philosopher and theologian, Moses Mendelssohn, but her parents, Abraham and Leah, felt their Jewish heritage to be socially risky, thus choosing to convert Fanny and her siblings to Christianity when Fanny was 11 years old. They also changed their surname to Mendelssohn Bartholdy. Despite her parents' attempt to hide their Jewish origins, Fanny objected to the name change, and in a letter to her brother Felix, she mentions, Bartholdy, that name which we all dislike. Both Fanny and Felix wrote under the name Mendelssohn, even after Abraham wrote in a letter to Felix, telling him to use only the surname Bartholdy, writing, there can no more be a Christian Mendelssohn than there can be a Jewish Confucius. Fanny's mother, Leah, was her first piano teacher, and it was soon evident that Fanny was a musical prodigy. Her father, Abraham, was a successful banker who moved the family to Berlin when Fanny was 6 years old. The family spared no expense on giving their children the best education. Fanny and Felix learned side by side from the same teachers. The estate had a large garden house in which her mother started having musical performances for friends and family, showcasing the children's skills. Their younger brother would play cello and their younger sister would sing. Fanny wrote her first musical composition when she was 11. By the age of 13, Fanny could play from memory all 24 preludes of Bach's difficult, The Well-Tempered Clavier. Felix readily admitted that his sister played the piano better than he did, and Fanny remained his chief musical advisor throughout his life. They wrote frequent letters to each other, sharing their work and seeking critiques. In his letters, Felix called her his muse and nicknamed her Cantor. Fanny's father made it clear that music was not a career for a woman. In a letter to Fanny when she was 14, he wrote, music will perhaps become Felix's profession, while for you, it must only be as ornament. Upper-class women in those days did not parade themselves before the public. It was considered unseemly to be a woman on stage. Felix, although supportive of her writing and playing, discouraged his sister from publishing, seeking to protect her from the public scrutiny involved. When Fanny was 16, she met Willem Hensel, an up-and-coming artist. Within a year, Willem was courting Fanny, and she was secretly setting some of his poems to music. Her parents were concerned about Hensel's age. He was 11 years older, and forced a 5-year separation. Willem left to study art in Italy, and Fanny wrote songs in place of writing letters to Willem, as letter writing was forbidden by her mother. Her song subjects tended to be about distance, loss, and absence. When Fanny was 22, her father again wrote to her, discouraging her music. He wrote, you must prepare more earnestly and eagerly for your real calling, the only calling of a young woman. I mean, the state of housewife. In October of 1828, just before Fanny turned 23, Willem returned to Berlin and was appointed by King Frederick William III as court painter. This opened the door for his courtship of Fanny. Willem supported her music, in fact telling her that her unlimited practice in music was a precondition for their new union. They were married the next year, and Fanny composed her own wedding anthem for the ceremony. They moved into a house on the Mendelssohn estate and each had their own studio. Every morning, Willem would place a blank manuscript paper on her music stand. Willem and Fanny occupied overlapping artistic spheres, not separate ones. She set his poetry to music, and he illustrated her works. Willem used Fanny as the model for Marian in his famous painting, Miriam from the Bible. Later on, Hensel met Queen Victoria, who noticed the beauty of Miriam in the painting. The queen bought the painting and paid with an emerald ring and a diamond. Fanny and Willem's only child was born in 1830, and she named him after her 3 favorite composers. Bach, Beethoven, and her brother, Sebastian Ludwig Felix Hensel. In 1831, following her mother's footsteps, Fanny started her own Sunday concert series. The garden house had large glass doors which opened onto the garden, allowing the space to hold large gatherings. Since these private events, Fanny was able to set the programs, recruit musicians, perform herself, and conduct and present her own compositions. Fanny's home became a hub of music in Berlin, and invitations were highly sought after. The concerts grew to include up to 300 guests, and at one performance, she had 7 princesses in the audience. While Felix became known as the foremost living composer in Germany, and despite her own one success, her father and brothers continued to discourage her from publication and public performances. With Fanny's agreement, Felix did publish some of her pieces under his name, seeking to give her music a public stage. This led to an awkward moment when Felix met with Queen Victoria. She gushed about her favorite composition of his. It turned out to be one that Fanny had written. To his credit, Felix admitted to the Queen that it was his sister who wrote it. Fanny's father died in 1935. In 1939, Fanny and Willem took their 9-year-old son on a year-long trip in Italy. There, Fanny was celebrated and enjoyed recognition as a talented composer and musician foremost, and as a woman second. At the age of 40, Fanny finally decided to start publishing her work under her own name. Over the next year, she had published about 60 of her more than 500 works. On May 14, 1847, Fanny assembled a chorus at her home to rehearse a piece composed by her brother. She lost sensation in her fingers, and as she was directing the music and accompanying them on piano, she left the room and passed away of a massive stroke hours later. She was 41. Her brother Felix was devastated by her passing away, and then passed away himself of a stroke less than 6 months later at the age of 38. And that is the story of Fanny Mendelssohn.